I was asked to talk a little about Inyoni Shalom BAYIS. So I'll first start with a story that I heard from Rabbi Glukowsky. Rabbi Glukowsky once came to New York by the Rabbi, and a couple of young Galite, erst after the Chasna, they asked him if he would give him a couple of shiurim in Hilchas Nida. And he agreed. And so the shiur was upstairs in the Zal in 770. I don't know exactly what time, exactly how it was, because the Bochum were learning there, but it was in Mistama, basically. Maybe it was summer, whatever. I don't know what it. He didn't tell me the time, I didn't ask any shilas. He told me he gave the shiur upstairs in the Zal. And he says he was sitting at the head of the table, and there was the light sitting around, and the Rebbe came from the house, and the Rebbe, when he was walked in to go to his room, the Rebbe gave a glance into the Zal, and then the Rebbe went into his room, and Label went in after, Label Grona, and then afterwards, the Label came out, and he walked into the Zal, and he said, the Rebbe wants to know what's the shiur, what's going on. So Rabbi Glukowsky says, "You can light him, gebeten from here that I should give a couple of shiurim in Hilchas Nida while I'm here in town. I'm giving a shiur in Hilchas Nida." And Label went back into the Rebbe's room, and then he came out afterwards. And Label came over to Rabbi Glukowsky, and he told him, "The Rebbe gebeten Ibrahim that while he's giving the shiur in Hilchas Nida, you should also add on Hilchas Shalom BAYIS." He never said because going the light was home chasna, and then Friday night after davening, they sitzen in 770 and they schmusen mit sehr Chaverim, wollen beteilen, verschiedene, versteht sich Chassidisches wollen beteilen, aber das schmust. And the Weile, schmust, and the Weile, the younger Weiblich, their young wives are waiting for the husbands to come home, and they're not coming home because they're schmoozing in shul, and it's going to Magmas Nefesh. Is Memele, mit dafür geredet wegen Hilchas Shalom BAYIS mit den Geleit, nicht nur Hilchas Nida, when you give me this. So ever since I heard that story from Yibyoel, I heard it from Rabbi Glukowsky. So it has been my custom that whenever I give shiurim in Hilchas Nida, that I also, at least the first half of the shiur, I shmuz together in Yoni Shalom BAYIS. Especially, that Reib Shonim Yidiyah Chochmah. Through the years, you pick up things in your own house, and then also from the different things that come along your way, you pick up things along the way, the problems that sometimes can crop up in a house, and what could be preventive medicine, as they say, to the problems, because we develop more of a certain sensitivity and an understanding of the dynamics of the Shalom BAYIS in the house that we're living in. And I'm going to want to discuss a couple of certain, I think that are certain major points that can help us out in such a thing. And I'm going to divide it up into three things. There's what's called Ava in the house, there's Kovid, and there's also Shalom. These three words. And I'm not going to start I'm going to start with Kovid for a minute. The Lashon Kovid, Rambam brings down that a person has to be mechabed his wife, mechabed his ishta yosim megufin, and Aish has to be mechabed his baila. The Lashon Kovid is used in Shalom BAYIS. Halacha. And obviously it doesn't mean that when she walks into the room, you stand up for her. or when he walks into the room, she stands up for him. But we're talking about something, we're talking about a musig that we want to little get into this musig. And to take this word, the word of cover, take it to where the Rebbe talks about in one of his, in 2 or 3 places the Rebbe talks about it. Not necessarily directly about Shalom BAYIS between a husband and wife, but the Rebbe talks about this musig in the famous Sicha and the famous letter of the Rebbe about Talmidei Rabbi Akiva shenogu koved zeh b'zeh. The first time, I think in Chelik Zayin, Hisofas L'Kut Sichas Lag Boimer, there's the letter that the Rebbe wrote in Tovshin Lamed, and then there's also L'Kut Sichas, there's Sicha also about Nogu koved zeh b'zeh. And the Rebbe has this famous shaila. How could it be that Talmidei Rabbi Akiva, that their Rebbe stood for V'ahavta L'recha kamoicha, as they're called Gadol b'Torah? So how could it be that they were nichshel in Ava to each other, when their Rabbi Akiva was his motto was V'ahavta L'recha kamoicha, as they're called Gadol b'Torah? And the hezbollah that the Rebbe gives. The husband that the Rebbe gives in the letter and also in the Sicha, he doesn't say it outright, but it comes out that the Rebbe says they weren't nichshel in Ava. Adarab, he says because they were taught V'ahavta L'recha kamoicha zeh klal gadol b'Torah, they cared about each other. They cared very much about each other, and because they knew that they have to care for each other, they interacted with each other and they tried to help each other and to influence their chaverim. And and what was the problem? So the Rebbe says, he says what he called. That we know that it says Keshem Shem Partzufein Shavim Ein Detein Shavos. And every individual is different. And each individual has a different personality. And because we have different personalities, we express ourselves differently. Each individual understands a little different than the other. Each individual also expresses himself, what he understands, the way he understands. You have people that are more happy-go-lucky types, so they take things in a much more of a happy, simcha dikoifen. You have people that are more serious in their nature, so everything that they take is in a much more of a serious nature. Different types of personalities. Everyone's an individual. What happened was, the Rebbe explains in the Sikha, in the letter also, the Rebbe says that what he called, that because they cared for each other, they were taught that they have to care for each other, and they have to help and share. So each one understood Rabbi Akiva his way, and each one felt that the way he understands what Rabbi Akiva said, and the way he's expressing what Rabbi Akiva said, is the way that what the Rebbe really meant. And because of that, they tried to influence the Chaverim to get it right. That the Rebbe meant to be much more happy the way you are. You're just too serious. And the serious guy looked at the guy that was more happy all the time, and he told him, not every day is Purim in Simchas Torah. You have to be much more serious. The Rebbe wanted you to be much more serious. And because they were Anshe Emes, the Rebbe says, because they were taught to be Anshe Emes, and when they saw that the Chaverim are not makabel, how they feel and how they think what Rabbi Akiva really meant, B'meila they couldn't show respect to the Chaverim in a true sense because they felt they weren't on the right derech. They weren't living up to what Rabbi Akiva really wanted from them. It sounds a little familiar, what I'm saying. In our day and age, we put in Rabbi Akiva, in our day and age, it sounds very familiar also, that everyone means well, but the other guy doesn't understand what they ever really wanted. The Kavana Pnimis, you can call it all the different words that we have today. Or it's a Befedish Siche, or there's a order like this, or they have a Tamol Gishim Azabrief, it's the Azamais for them. Each one is like they say, each one attaches himself to what fits more his personality. So when you tell him all of a sudden, no, but the Rebbe Tamul goes up and says, that's a gorge. because it doesn't fit the way he is trying to shape, according to the way he understands and the way he feels, certain things just don't fit. So there's a different sheet that's how to deal with that. One sheet is just to say, nicht alles kann man verstehen. There's another sheet that it says that, wer sagt that the Rebbe has gesagt? Another sheet that says it doesn't exist. You know what I mean? And that's why a lot of times I used to joke. I used to tell my own kids. I used to tell them, I pick up sometimes a Kfar Chabad magazine, and I can get all upset. I'm especially going back to after Gimel Tammuz. I can get all upset because I see that he can write articles that the guy that's writing the article is like, Mailam Ayin from a lot of other things that were going on. And then I open up the other magazine, the Shir magazine, and I also get upset because I see there Mailam Ayin for a lot of things that were going on at the time also. So I said, I don't mind saying that not everything I understand. I can live with that. Not everything can understand. Not everything I'm going to be metaretz. But that's a bezunder parsha, what I'm just mentioning right now. I mean, it's a bezunder zach. I'm not going to go into that details because it's a vikur that's never going to end, like it's been going on since 20 years. I'm not going to go into that. I'm going back to what we're talking about now, about shalom BAYIS. What does the Rebbe say about the Talmidei Rebbe Kiva? It says about Talmidei Rebbe Kiva that because their chaver wasn't able to accept how they understand things and how they feel about things, they couldn't respect them in the full sense because they felt that they were wrong, they weren't doing the right thing, and so on and so forth. And not only that they were wrong, sometimes you can even say even more than that. They're misrepresenting, and they're doing terrible things, and so on and so forth. So it wasn't. So Rebbe says, doesn't say in the Gemara, they didn't love each other. The Lashon in the Gemara says, and the word that the Rebbe says in the Nikuda is that Kavod means recognizing that everyone is an individual that has their own personality, own understanding, and own needs. And Kavod means respecting the individuality of every single individual. Realizing that people are different, people can understand different, people can feel differently, and people can also need things differently. And that's the Hagdorah that the Rebbe writes in the letter, that there's an inyan of lechabed means recognizing that we are individuals and we're different, and recognizing those differences and respecting those differences. And here's what we get to when we talk about our homes. When we get married, we're getting married not to just a chavrusa, who's different. Even when you have a chavrusa, it's kishein parts of shomein deishos. We're getting married, like the Gemara says, it's am b'fnei atzmi. We're getting married to somebody it's not my double. It's somebody that has different understanding, different feelings, different needs. I'll give you an example, a blatant example that you pick up right away after you get married. A wife can tell her husband, I have nothing what to wear. And you're thinking to yourself, in the closet there's at least 20 dresses. I don't have any shoes to wear. And you take a look in the closet, there's at least 5 to 10 pairs of shoes. What does that mean? You have nothing what to wear. What does it mean you have nothing what to, no shoes to put on? You've got 5 to 10 pairs of shoes over there. What does it mean? The need for clothing by a woman is different than the need for clothing by a man. A man have a pair of pants, you can wear it for a whole week or 2 weeks. I remember when I was a boch in yeshiva, when the mikveh was in 749, Yankel used to sell, there was a guy, Yankel over there, the guy from the mikveh, man, she used to sell clothes. Also, shampoo, soap, and he had clothes. So I remember I had a chaver of mine that he would, from week to week, wear the same clothes. He came from a gevir shivashpacha. He would buy my Yankel on Friday a shirt, underwear, and that's how he went from week to week. Say that. We wear white shirts. We wear white shirts all the time. We don't feel that we have to be different. You can walk into a chasna with your wife, and then when she walks out together with you from the chasna afterwards, you say, how was the chasna? And she'll tell you, it was a very nice chasna, but there was one thing that bothered me. And you tell her, what? She says, there was a lady at the chasna had the same dress that I had. It finished me off. And then the wife says to the husband, and how was the chasna by you? And he says, it was a nice chasna, but there was one thing that bothered me. I was the only one with a green suit, and I stood out too much. It bothered me. The husband and wife, one can't take it that 1 out of 300 has the same dress, and the husband can't take it that he stood out from everybody because he was the only one with that certain color that he was wearing. So obviously you see that we're talking about different needs. When what does it say in Shulchan Aruch? For Yontif. Ain't simcha l'babos, ain't simcha l'yayin. What does it say about a lady? You buy her clothing, you buy her a tachshit. That's for her simcha. That's what gives her simcha. A nice steak, that doesn't talk to her. What talks to her is a piece of clothing or a piece of jewelry. So obviously, you see, you're talking about somebody who has different needs, a different understanding of things. And not because she's not going to understand the way you understand, that means that something's the matter with her. And not that she feels differently about certain things means that something's the matter with her. It means that she has a way that she's built with her personality, that she thinks differently than you, and that she feels differently than you, and she has different needs. One of the big mistakes, for example, that we can make, another example, a husband wants to surprise his wife with a present. He wants to get her a nice piece of jewelry for Yontif or something. So he goes and he exerts himself, costs money and everything, and he picks out something, that's an expensive piece of jewelry, yachasit, relatively speaking with him, and he comes home and he's all thrilled with himself that he's going to surprise his wife with a nice gift. And he says, I bought you a present for Yontif. And she opens up and she sees, let's say, it's a ring or it's a necklace or it's a bracelet. And she looks at it and she says, I can't wear this. No, thank you. No, how considerate you were of thinking of me. I appreciate the trouble that you went to. The first thing she says, she looks and she says, I can't wear this. And then she adds on another statement that's even more crazier. She says, it's not me. It's not me, she says. And the husband answers back, of course it's not you, it's a bracelet. It's a ring, it's a necklace, it's not you. But what is she saying really when she says it's not me? And what is she really saying when she says I can't wear this? Because the way she relates to clothing is in order for her to be able to put on a piece of clothing or to wear a piece of jewelry, she has to identify with it. She has to be able to be willing to unite herself with it. And if she can't identify with it, if she can't unite with it, then it's not me. Even though that it's just a ring and a bracelet. And I'll tell you something. What do you know? Anyone that learned last week, Pasach Elio in Torah, Atzilus is Tachshitim, and Biyah is Levushim. And he says that Tachshitim is more Me'uchid than a Levush, because a Levush is Mogin, master. Aber a Tachshit, das ist Miyape, und dort in Front mehr Yichud. A befehlische Torah. Tikkunin und nicht Levushim. So you see there's something going on here. What was his mistake? His grand mistake, the fellow that brought home this bracelet. His grand mistake is that when you want to buy a present for your wife, present and surprise by men go together. By a lady, you want to buy her a present, like a piece of clothing or a piece of jewelry. Don't surprise her. Because you might be way off with what she can relate to. Tell her, let's go buy. I want to buy a gift. Let's go buy together a piece of jewelry. Let her pick it out so that she should be able to feel good with what she's going to wear. You might not realize that that's important. But for her, that is very, very important. Because you want to know something? You could buy her expensive gifts and things, and it will stay in the drawer or in the closet, and she'll never put it on. Either she has enough guts to tell you, please, let me pick. Don't bring me home such surprises. Or if she's too idle, she'll just say thank you. She'll put it in the drawer and you come out. We'll never see her put it on. You might have luck once in a while. And really what you wanted to do was to make her happy, and you caused her really a certain sense of agmas nefesh. Because you weren't sensitive to the fact that she's built differently than you. She has her individual personality and needs, and you're looking at her with masculine husband eyes and not the way a woman thinks. Nogu koved zeh b'zeh means recognizing that we have different needs, different personalities, and different characters and feelings. That's one thing. And if I'm already talking about feelings, I want to say another thing about feelings. Many, many times you'll hear in a conversation that you have with your wife, she can say a statement like this: I don't feel you really love me. She says it. Now, what's the reflex reaction to such a statement? The reflex reaction to such a statement is, it's not true. Listen, of course I love you. That's the reflex reaction. What is more of a reaction that's important to learn how to react when you hear such a thing like that? It's to say, why do you feel that I don't love you? Can you explain to me why you feel that way? Can you give me an example or two of where you feel that I'm lacking in love towards you? And then when she'll tell you, I'll give you an example. I'll tell you an example. That I was sitting with a couple that were married for 4 or 5 months, and the wife tells me, I made a mistake. My husband doesn't really love me. And I said to her, give me a couple of examples where you picked up such a message that she doesn't really love you. She says to me, I'll give you 2 simple examples, she tells me. She says, you know what it means when a person sneezes in a house? When a person sneezes in a house, what are you supposed to do when a person sneezes? You say, zu gesund. You say, God bless you. She says, I've been sneezing since we're married. It's like I'm a wall. No zu gesund, no God bless you. Okay, I said to her, that's the first example. You have to understand, I have to hold myself in from laughing. You understand? But I'm listening. I'm listening. You have to listen. That's one of the vort that you say, it says in the Mishnah, Altar b'sichem isha. You know why it says Altar b'sichem isha? Because you have to listen to them more than you have to talk to them. You got to listen. I'm listening. So I'm listening. Okay, I said to her, give me a second example. She says, since we're married, the guy doesn't know what it means to bring a flower home. Erev Shabbos, bring some flowers home. Nothing. Okay. I heard these 2 things. I turn to the husband, I say to the husband, tell me, in your house where you grew up, when somebody sneezes, you say zu gesund? He says to me, no. So I said to him, you know what, I'll tell you what went on my house. I had a bubba that lived with me, a Polish bubba. She was from Poland. So, from the real Polish Yiddish. First sneeze was zu gesund. Second sneeze was tzaleben. Third sneeze was tzalangiyor. Fourth sneeze, it was already schlepping the ears and everything. I said, there was a whole ceremony in my house. So I said to him, I want you to realize your wife came from a house that when somebody sneezes, they said zu gesund. And she says now that she feels that if you don't answer when she sneezes, she feels like she doesn't exist. Learn fast to start saying zu gesund. Doesn't cost that much money. It's just developing a sensitivity that it's important to her. How do I know it's important to her? Because I listened and I asked her to explain to me what's bothering you. Give me some examples. And she gave me that example, and it's very cheap to change that example. If she would tell me he's not bringing me diamond rings every Monday and Thursday, I would be in trouble. I'm not Rockefeller, like they say. But she's telling me I need a zu gesund on a sneeze. The next thing is flowers. I said to him, did you see flowers in your house? He says, my mother hates flowers. She says, it's a waste of money. My father bought for my mother plastic flowers. It's on the table, and it's been there for the last 25 years. So I said to him, well, your wife likes fresh flowers. Get used to it. It's an expression of love to her when you come home with nice flowers for Shabbos. It's important to her. And this is a very, very important thing for us to remember. I sat with a couple that were married for over 20 years, 4 children. And the wife says to me, my husband is mizalzel. How do you say mizalzel in English? I really lost my whole English over here. You know what I mean? And I so how many times? Mizalzel. Zilzel. So, and he says to me back, Ma, I'm mizalzel on her, she's mizalzel on me. So I say to them, I don't speak that well Hebrew. I don't understand really what it means to be mizalzel. So I'd like you to give me at least each one to give me one example of what it means to be mizalzel. So the wife says, I'll give you an example. Off the cuff, she tells me. I asked my husband when we got married, please do not bring me any uninvited guests home without letting me know 10, 15 minutes before. I'm not talking about guests, she says, for food. I asked him, I don't want somebody coming into the house without me knowing it in advance. Give me even 10, 15 minutes of warning. And she says, because I want to, sometimes the house doesn't look so neat, so tidy, so clean. I've got 10, 15 minutes. Take things off the table, fix up the couch, the pillows, just to make sure that the house is presentable. Give me a warning. She says, I've been asking it for 20 years, and he brings home all the time people without letting me know. That's not called being mezalzel. Mezalzel, a lack of respect of what I asked. Okay. I turn to him and I say, can you give me an example of what you think? And he tells me, I asked my wife many years ago, I told her that when I get up in the morning, I like that next to my bed, I have my fresh set of clothing. I asked her if she could just make sure that when I get up in the morning, I have a fresh set of clothes. 20 years I'm asking for it. Never happens. I always have to go, start looking in the drawers, start looking in the closet, or go to the laundry room and take it from after it was washed and so on and so forth. From the dryer, not by my bed. Okay. So I listen to I look at the guy and I say to him, you heard what your wife said about not bringing uninvited guests? What do you say about that? She says she's been asking you for 20 years. What do you say about that? And he says to me, Shtuyot. Narishkeit. He says to me. So what? So if a guy walks into the house and he sees a cup of coffee on the table, or he sees a pillow a little off from the couch, big deal. That's called being mezalzel. Okay. Then I turn to the wife and I say, what do you say about the fact that your husband says he would like to have fresh clothing next to him? Rabbi, she tells me. In Israel they say, Kvod Rav. Kvod Rav, she says to me. I have 4 children. What is your 5th baby? He has to have his clothing next to the table? Next to his bed? He doesn't know where the clothing are? Mela, if he would tell me that to look for a pair of socks at St. Phil's Aderech would be one thing, which happens in certain homes. But he doesn't have to say St. Aderech. He knows exactly where the clothes is. So he says, what do you call it? She said, he's a baby. So I heard, and you're listening to this conversation, I'm getting into trouble. You start digging, and what am I going to tell him? Es gerecht. A cup of coffee on the table, something like a big deal. Es gerecht, a pillow a little off, big deal. And she's not richtig. What is he, a kid? He has to have his clothes next to his... What's really going on behind the scenes? What's really going on behind the scenes is exactly what I said before. She, 20 years in the marriage, when I ask her to give me an example of what's called being mezalzel, lack of respect, What does she give me an example? A mice with a cup on the table, with a pillow not in the place, to tidy up a little. 20 years married, that's what kind of an example she gives. What does that mean? It means like this, that for her, it's important. For you, I told this husband, for you, you're right. For you, it's not important. For you, it didn't register even. Because you're looking at its Narishkeit. But it's not Narishkeit in her eyes. How do I know? Because she gave me off the cuff. 20 years later, she's telling me this example. Which means that for her, it is important. Because if it wasn't important, she wouldn't say it. And the same thing the opposite way. I tell the lady. I said to him, listen, I'm not going to be now a psychologist that start going into psychoanalysis why he needs the clothes next to the bed. You know what? Maybe his mother spoiled him. Maybe he feels that that's an expression of love, just like the Gesundheit on the sneeze or the flowers. By him having his clothing prepared for him next to his bed is an expression of caring for him. But how do I know that it's important to him? Because 20 years later, he expresses that need. And therefore, I say a statement that I always tell everyone I'm talking to. Take a statement, Neketai Klola B'Yodcha. What is important for your spouse becomes important for you. What is important for your spouse becomes important for you. Because Bas Ploini Leploini, you married her, it's Ashgocha Protis, and this is something that's important for her. If you'll succeed through life to bring her to an understanding that it's not so important, and she calms down, and you see that she really has come to an understanding that a certain thing is not so important, Vakasha, but as long as she expresses it in her speech, she says it, and as long as she says, I always say to fellows, when you hear your wife say, I feel, put your antennas up. Put your antennas up when she says, I feel. Because she's letting you know what's going on inside in her gut. I feel. And when you hear that word, I feel lonely. So again, what's the reflex of your action? Why do you feel lonely? Baruch Hashem, the kids are here. Where do you go? Your mother comes over to visit every day. Why do you feel lonely? Instead of asking, why lonely? You're not lonely. Why do you feel lonely? What's bothering you? I want to understand. Why? Because she said she feels lonely. So what do you want to tell? You're going to tell, no, you're not lonely. She said to you she feels lonely. If she feels that way, that's where she's at right now. You have to be able to try to analyze and understand what is going on in her mind and her heart. You're living with her. She's your partner. At the end of the day, you have to be at the point you could write a thesis about your wife. Because you're living with her and you have to learn to live with her. And you have to be able to pick up what's important to her and what's not. And if not, that's a lack of respect. Because you're living with an individual. I remember I had a Rebbe when I was in Toronto. Growing up in Toronto, I had a Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Lipsker. Rabbi Ella Lipsker. He's the father of Shalom Lipsker from Miami and Mendel Lipsker from South Africa. He was a Heverman, smart individual, everything. And I remember one time he told us, he was speaking to the class, and he says, I have 3 kinds of Talmidim. I have one Talmud that whatever I say goes in here and it penetrates and sits in it in his mind. Then I have another Talmud that goes in here and out the other ear. He says, express. Then I got a 3rd Talmud, he says. What's the 3rd Talmud? He says like this. Didn't even get in. Didn't even get in. Not even an express. Many, many times we're sitting in our homes. Our wives can express themselves and say something. And we're so not tuned in. It's so not important to us what she's saying because to us it's trivial. It's shtusim, it's narishkeiten, that we don't even hear what they are saying. And that's called putting up your antennas. And that's called listening and picking up a sensitivity to who you are married to. What's important to her, what she needs, and also understanding how she looks at things and how she feels about things. It's part of life. The Rebbe writes in a letter to a Rov wrote into the Rebbe that he's having a lot of strife in his Kehillah. And the Rebbe tells him, your Kehillah is compiled of young people and older people. The older people have their needs. They need to have their seat where they sit, Mokim Kavua. They need to have their aliyahs. It's an older person already. The younger generation that's in your shul, they have to be active. They have to feel a part of building, of doing. They've got that youthful energy. If you will learn, the Rebbe says to this fellow in the letter, this Rov, that to respect the different needs of the different members in your Kehillah and to come their way, that they should be able to get those needs, then there'll be peace and tranquility in your Kehillah. What the Rebbe is really telling you is that milui tzrochim from a person helps the person should be in a peaceful and a tranquil mindset. Because I'll tell you something now also. When a person's living in a house and they're not getting what they need, they're not being heard what they really need. I'm not just talking about physical needs like clothing and things like that, which is also that we're different completely. But I'm also talking about emotional needs. Like, for example, the wife that can say, Rabbi, I don't have a husband. And the husband says, what are you talking about? I work like a dog. I get up in the morning. I work a whole day. Baruch Hashem, this parnosa. I care for the house. You have an open check. Everything is, Baruch Hashem, fine. There's good furniture. There's always food in the house. There's everything going on. And you can say to me that you don't have a husband? So again, that's a reflex reaction. What he really should be asking her, why do you feel that you don't have a husband? Explain to me. And you know what she's going to probably say? She's going to probably say, I don't have who to talk to. You come home tired. You just want to eat something, and then you fall asleep. There's no one who to talk to. I can't share what's going on in the house. Can't share what's going on with the kids. I can't share with you what's going on with my life. That's what she really means, that she doesn't have a husband. In this particular case that I'm talking about. But the guy doesn't ask the question because he's all caught up with him doing all what's right. But he's not listening to what she said and trying to understand what's bothering her. And that's one of the problems that we have. And what happens is when a person is hungry, what happens when a person's hungry? Physically, what happens to a person when he gets hungry? If he gets hungry, so he starts getting irritated. And he gets nervous. And he could be short-tempered when he gets hungry. He could shoot out. His fuses blow. All kinds of things can happen when a person's really hungry. Or he's too tired to do anything. Just doesn't have energy. When a person is emotionally hungry, when their needs are not being met, so either it comes out a temper, anger, disappointment, you can hear it in the voice, discouraged, despair, depression, fatigue all the time. It expresses itself in all these kinds of ways. When a person is emotionally hungry. And this week, I sat with a couple that the husband wasn't nizer in Hilchas Taras HaMishpacha V'Sidartis. He was mezalz in the halachas. And his wife was very, very, very tzibrochen from it. They're married for a couple of years. And she tried to tell him the whole time, "Setoignisht." And she tried to tell him, and she tried to keep away with all the different things. And he was mezalzel, and he what do you call it? Until finally, she stopped saying anything because she saw she wasn't getting anywhere. And he thought that because she's quiet, that she finally realized, bug off. I'm not so frum like you really want me to be. But she wasn't really quiet because of that. She came to terms with it. It was slowly brewing inside. She went into deep depression. And she couldn't move from her bed for months and months, and no one knew the reason why. They thought after birth she has postpartum depression, and nothing to do with that. And they were giving her some medicine for it, and the depression kept on, until finally one day she finally shot out what's going on. And it all came out that she was so at a point where she felt that she was, such a lack of respect. Mitzad, what she learned all of her life of respecting Torah and not doing against halachas, and also not respecting her and using her as an object. And it put her into deep depression. She was quiet, but it wasn't a quiet that means of consent and everything is business as usual. She was getting deeper and deeper into this emotional starvation that she finally cracked open. Thank God that she cracked open, because finally we're getting to the bottom of the problem. But this is what happens when a person becomes emotionally starved. You can never tell. It could be short temper, anger, nervousness, agitated, fatigue, despair, yush, depression. All these things could come. Different personalities. One reacts always being angry, always being critical. Another one reacts fatigue and depression. Each one reacts in a different way. But where it's coming from a lot of times is a lack of respect, of needs, and also not being connected to who you're living with. Not getting to the bottom of things and listening and hearing and try to connect and to realize that what's important to your spouse is also important to you. This is one thing. And the Rebbe sagt this. He says, not realizing that a person's individual, his needs, is a lack of respect. It's not a lack of ava. You could love somebody, but you could choke somebody out of love also. Here's where we get to the next thing. The Talmidim were trying to force their opinion on the other one. Choking out of love. You so care that you want to make sure that the person is doing everything what you feel has to be done. Meanwhile, you're choking them. Because one of the examples that I like to give in the kitchen is that you have two kinds of pots in a kitchen. You have a crock pot, which is a slow cooker. And then there used to be, today you almost don't see it, there used to be a pressure cooker, where it closed in a special way and it would cook much quicker than regular. Each one gets the job done. Each one cooks the meat. The question is, what's the pace? The pressure cooker is a quickie, pressurized. The slow cooker, the crock pot, has a slower pace. Even that, when you want somebody to do something, you want to influence somebody to do something, or you're asking for something, you have to be able to take what's the pace of the individual. Not everyone is as quick as you. Or not everyone, the other person is much quicker and you're more on a slower pace. Everyone develops and everyone does it in their way. That's part of life also. Recognizing the differences of who we are as individuals, and it comes out even in such ways. So that's the first thing. And that's the concept of the covet, and that's the concept of recognizing the needs.
No, covet means that you just respect them, and you have to want it also. You said that,
You're not necessarily you have to want, but the fact that it's your wife, and that's what's important to her, it becomes important to you. You can't walk away from it. Even in your eyes, it doesn't mean anything. Like the story I said, the guy felt that a plate on the table is nothing. He felt that a pillow on the couch is mishigasen. But it's not mishigasen. For you, it's a mishigasen, but for her, not. Of course, it's not a one-way street. It works both ways. But this concept is a concept that we have to realize what's going on, because a lot of conflict and a lot of heartache in our homes is because of this lack of sensitivity. That's why I started with it, because I see it all the time. And we all fail to a certain extent when it comes to this. Because Odom Korev Eitzel Atzmai, and a person sees the world through his eyes. To walk out of your bubble and to look at the world with somebody else's eyes, it's nemta yigi and avoid. That's called bruchim aboim, to being married of an emes. That it's not just two people living in a house that are sitting at the table eating together at a table. It's getting into the other person's cup and hearts and understanding the other person they're living with, and getting to that achdus that has to be. The Rebbe writes to a letter. There's the famous letter that the Rebbe writes to Mrs. Sharfstein, that she was the Yisoyme, and she went into Yechidus. Her father was killed in Boston. Somebody attacked him in a park and was walking with a rov, and she was killed. The Rebbe took a very special interest in helping her out, as she was a Yisoyme. And she went into Yechidus, and the Rebbe she was already at the age to become a Kallah. So the Rebbe started suggesting certain shidduchim for her from the Bocher. And she said, no, that's Turkish. I know about this. I heard it's nothing from here. It's also not from here. And she knocked off a couple of names that the Rebbe said. And then the Rebbe all of a sudden said to her, in Yechidus, the Rebbe said to her, she tells the story. She says, the Rebbe said to her, you're probably reading a lot of romantic novels. And she blushed a little, and the Rebbe told her that the love that they describe in those books is not the real love. The real love, he says, is once you get married, and there's the ichpatiyut, yoim yoimis, there's caring for each other on a day-to-day basis, in the smallest of things. That's the building blocks of becoming more and more like Devik together. And at the end of the day, the Rebbe says, you reach a point after you're married, after a certain point, that you can't even remember how it was when you were by yourself. That's how it gets so entangled and united together, the Rebbe says. But what's the key? The ichpatiyut yoim yoimis. The caring on a day-to-day basis in the smallest of things. That's what makes it happen. And that brings me to another. We spoke now about the COVID. I'll mention now about Ava for a minute. There's a Sikha from the Rebbe in Parshas Kedoshim that the Rebbe talks about the Sai Dalach Sana Lechaver Choloi Savid, and he talks about the Vavtlecha Kamoicha Zeh Klal Godel B'Torah V'Zeh Klal Torah Kulam. He talks about the difference between the two. But the beginning of the Sikha, when the Rebbe talks about the beginning of the Sikha, the Rebbe says, Rashi says, Omer Rebbe Kiva, Vavtlecha Kamoicha Zeh Klal Godel B'Torah. So the Rebbe asks the Shaila, what's bothering Rashi? That all of a sudden he tells us, Rabbi Kiva says, Zeh Klal Gadol B'Torah. What's bothering him? And the Rebbe says the Shaila that's bothering Rashi is l'chayre, a lot of the mitzvahs that are benod l'chaveirei is v'havta lecha kamoicha. So what's the pshat in the mitzvahs of v'havta lecha kamoicha? A lot of mitzvahs that we have are under this v'havta lecha kamoicha. What does it mean, this v'havta lecha kamoicha? And that's why Rashi says, because this is it's a klal gadol b'Torah. And the Rebbe says, what's the pshat, a klal gadol? That the protim of Avos Yisrael is not just next to it, a posik before and a posik after. It's a klal gadol. So there's a ribi protim, and the ribi protim is all over Torah. And the Rebbe says, what was Rabbi Kiva giving us a message? He says, Rabbi Kiva was giving us a message, the famous Shaila in Chassidus, how can you give a tzivui to love? It's a regish. It's not asiyah. So how can you give a tzivui to love? So b'derech klal, what's the normal tshuva that we always say? The normal tshuva is, it's this bonus. The mitzvah is on the cup. Avos Hashem, trach v'in gadlus Hashem, trach v'in chazdei Hashem. You'll have Av. Their number. And the Alter Rebbe brings it down. Av afterecha kamoicha. In Atomim. The Rebbe quotes from Atomim. Think about the mile of Ayid, his neshama, his miles that he has. Should be moyer Ava. I remember once by Fabring in Simchas Torah, the Rebbe asked the Shalom v'samachta v'chagecha. How can you tell me? See, the Rebbe said, "Daf trachning yonim samchim, kiyam zohom de simcha." So the mitzvah is rikshius. The answer that usually is said is the cup. The key to the heart is the head. The Rebbe in this Sikha brings down, he says, Rabbi Kiva had the Shaila also. How can you give a tzivu on a regish that you think of? And what's the answer that he gives? It's a klal godel. If you want to get to Ava, you have to be oisik in the protim. Hachnosas orchem, hachnosas kala, halvoyes anes, nichem avelim, biker choylim, stokke gmilas chasodim. Be oisik in the protim, and that's how you build the klal godel of haflech kamoich. And it has negative protim. Loy sikin, loy siter, loy seilach rochel. All these things. There's the kumva say, the sheval tasa, there's surminan da say toiv. And that's how you build the ava. And the memesis, this is what the Rebbe was saying to Mrs. Sharfstein in the letter. The caring on a day-to-day basis, the small little things that you do in life, build the ava. Throwing out the garbage every day. Preparing a cup of coffee. You come home, you were outside, it was hot, and your natural reflex is you walk over to the fridge to take something cold to drink. Taking 2 cups to pour because she was also hot outside. It's these small things. Buying up a chocolate you know she likes. Picking up a phone in the middle of the day and asking how does she feel. Small little things. But those are the small things, this askis and these little pratim, that make it happen. She doesn't have to ask you to throw out the garbage. When you come home, it should become a natural reflex that you look at the garbage can and you see if it's full, you throw it out without her asking. She doesn't have to ask you to clean up after you take a shower. The shower is all full of whatever's left over after your shower. You clean it up yourself. How do you know? Because she said it 2 or 3 times that it bothers her. It's enough. It's the small little things like that that make a big difference. Isaskis beprotim makes that difference. Of course, there's another thing. There's this bonus also. What you think is what you're going to feel. The Rebbe writes to a letter to a lady that her husband was a principal in a school, and he used to come home after a whole day's work, and he really short fusing. When he came home, his nerves were shot, and he would shoot anything that bothered him, and she couldn't live with it. She went to the Rebbe. So the Rebbe tells her, there's no question about it, something has to be done about it. You should go to either a Rov, or to a Mashpia, or to a Yoetz, to discuss it, to see what can be done about it. But the Rebbe says, but you should realize one thing, is what the Rebbe tells you in the letter. Don't take it personal. Because knowing what your husband's job is, and the hundreds and hundreds of talmidim they have, with the staff that he has to work with, a whole day, with all the pressures, it's not a personal thing that's happening. It's coming from all the pressure that's on him from before. That's why. It's not you personally. Now, what was the Rebbe telling this lady, and as he's answering her? He was trying to help her to readjust how she's thinking about it. Because the minute she won't feel that it's personal, it'll be easier for her to deal with it. As long as she sees, is it a personal attack? it's much more harder for her to deal with it. He was trying to help her to look at it in a different kind of way. It's like we say, "Adonis kol olam lekavschus, al todnas chaver chat shetigil im koimer." I tell you, husbands, you get married, a wife after a couple of months she becomes pregnant. She's sleeping all day. The house is upside down. So I tell him, "Good morning. Welcome to the club. Your wife is expecting. She's nauseous. One of the things that happens is you get very tired and fatigued. She's not anymore Mrs. Silverstein like she was till now. She's 1.5 people right now. You want your cake and to eat it too. You want her pregnant, you want to have children. This is one of the ways, this is what happens. Welcome." "Oh, yeah. Yeah, not only that, get ready. She might get nauseous from you." "What? That could happen?" "Yeah, it happens." And then she won't want to look at you for at least 3-4 months. And she won't be able to cook maybe, because she just throws up every time she smells the food. It happens. You might have to close your kitchen door, put towels at the bottom. Whatever you're cooking shouldn't go out in the smell, because if not, she keeps throwing up. All that can happen. Recognize that things change and look at it in a different way. Because the way you react to things is the way you look at things, understand things. So a lot of times we have to understand what's going on to be able to help us feel differently than we're feeling right now. People have expectations. They get married. And they think that everything is going to be just exactly like they saw in their houses. That's what's going to be in their house. But people are different. You're all upset because you have expectations. The guy goes on a date. He asks the girl he's going out with, "Do you clean the dishes in your house, or is the sink full of dishes?" You don't ask such a question. Why? Because either you come from a house where your mother is very careful and clean, so there's never really dishes in the sink. After a meal, everything is washed right away. Or you come from a house that takes 2-3 days before that gets washed. So you're not going to ask that question. What happens if you come from a house where your mother is a very, very, what's it called? She's very, very strong in cleanliness. And you get married to a wife that she comes from a house where her mother, 3-4 days, would have till the last dish. And then no choice to do the dishes then. And you get married, and you get all upset. House looks gefährlich. What's going on in my kitchen? And you're living with expectations. And then you're getting all upset. And then you start fighting with your wife. It can't go on like this. And my friend, it can go on. I came from a house where my mother was such a Mesudadik person. Wednesday, the Lechuna Rana that you say on Wednesday, she was preparing from Shabbos already from Wednesday. The most calmest day, as I grew up as a child, it was Friday was the most calmest day in my house. When I came home from Cheder 1 o'clock, the food was already on the blech. It was peaceful Friday. I get married. Friday becomes a whirlwind. It took me time to adjust. My house is a different Friday. If I wouldn't adjust and understand that there's differences and people are different, I could walk around all upset, all in despair, who knows, mekach toys, the ganze Geschäft, all 9 yards. We have to be able to dissect, analyze what's bothering me. Are my expectations realistic or not realistic? Am I living with what I saw in my house and I'm thinking that it has to be exactly the way I saw in my house and it's different? To adjust to it. We feel the way we look at things. It's our attitude. The Rebbe once said in a letter, somebody wrote into a letter into the Rebbe with a very, very negative kind of real down. And the Rebbe says to the person, that since the Chet Eitz Hadas, there's no shleimus in Olam Hazeh. Everything is mu'urif toiv v'ra. The question is how much toiv and how much ra. Everything is mu'urif toiv v'ra. And the Rebbe says, I'll give two extreme examples. Adam Arishan was in Gan Eden, surrounded by Gan Eden. He says at the end of the day, Adam Arishan, what does he do? He complains to Hashem about the wife that was given to him. He found what to complain about. L'umazeh, the Rebbe says, a guy was in the Nazi concentration camp, surrounded by Gehenna, and he gets up in the morning and he says, Moidani lefanecha melech chai v'kaim shechzarti b'nishmosi b'chem le'amrasa. He says, most of us are not at this extreme and not that extreme. Most of us are somewhere in the middle. The question is, on what are we going to put our emphasis? Are we going to look at the black spots in life? And therefore we're going to feel that way? Or we're going to look more at the good spots that we have in life to feel the other way? It all depends on our attitude, the way we want to look at things, the Rebbe says. And it's the same thing in the house. There's not going to be shleimus. But when we know how to look at the good things, instead of just looking at the negative things all the time, then we'll feel more positive. But if we're looking all the time at the negative things, then we'll feel negativity. And then it expresses itself usually the way you talk. And then it expresses itself also the way you look. Like we say, looks can kill. It expresses itself in body language. How you react to things. So Mamela, the Ava, is side isaskis in the protem, and it's also the way we look at things and our attitude and the way we analyze things, and we work on ourselves to be able to understand, to help us to be able to get to the right kind of feelings that we're really supposed to have. And if we can't do it ourselves, ein chovish mater sa'atzum beis asurim, you talk to somebody else, asay l'charav, knei l'chachover, to talk about it, to be able to help you to readjust, to be able to help you to reframe, to be able to help you to get a better understanding of the sensitivity of what's going on. And it's nothing wrong by discussing it, because when no one is Mr. Perfect and no one was born to be right into this whole dynamics of marriage, and everything just has to fit perfect. Maybe it works for a couple of months. I remember when I got married, after 3-4 months I got married, I met one of my chaverim. He says to me, "No, Mendel, fought already? You fought?" I tell him, "No, you're not married yet." So I said, "Why are you saying that to me?" He says to me, "You'll see. It's almost impossible." He says, "The kunz is know to keep Geneva War Accords, to know how to fight, and to pick your fights, and also to know how to get out of it with less casualties." That's what he tells me. Now, of course, you have people that have a harder time, and you have people that have less of a time. But all of us, we're living with different people. It's only natural that there's going to be a certain type of friction here and there. It's a natural thing that people are different. And we shouldn't lose ourselves because of that. But at the same time, it's like when I sit at din Torahs and guys come into din Torah and they start slugging at each other. One of the statements that I always say at din Torah, I tell the guys from both sides, I say, listen, there's life after the din Torah also. Be careful. Not everything you have to say what you're saying. Because afterwards you're going to meet that guy every day when you're walking in the street. You're allowed to have a difference of opinion. You're allowed to have an argument, and then we'll have to see what can be done. But don't add on paprika and salt and pepper with ketchup and everything else. Because you're going to have to live with the person tomorrow also. And the same thing also. We can have differences of opinion. But don't escalate it. Don't turn it into World War. Because then it leaves scars. That's another topic for itself, the emotional scars that we leave over when these happen. And we have our wives can tell us something that we said 3 years ago. And you say back, it was a ma'aseh v'drayor tzrig. Was willst du jetzt? Why do you keep on bringing it up? Because it's an emotional scar that when you rub it, it comes out again. So we got to be careful on those emotional scars. Beyond pocket pakality, like it says. You got to be careful about that. Because it comes out. So Mela, I'm giving you just a couple of... Kenish learned a ganz Torah called Al Regel Achas. This is I just want to say, the more that there's a meeting of needs in a house, the more that there's respect, and you're connected to what's going on in your house, and you're connected to your wife also, of trying to be sensitive for her needs and her feelings and everything like that. All the other things that you're going to want in life, ashtub from, Teidike chinuch, achsidische chinuch, yir shamayim, tznius, all these things. Once you're a mensch, and once you're a person that's sensitive, and you care, and you show that, a lot of what we're talking about that we want, it goes in easy. It becomes kemayim aponim king lev adam la'adam, and they come along with everything that's important for us, because they connect with what's important to us too. When we show that we connect to them, what's important for them, and we're caring and needy and sensitive for them, then the things that are important to us become important to them too. But when they resent you because you're not meeting their emotional needs, you're not being sensitive what's bothering them, you're not giving them what they really need, and you're not oisik in the pratim, the small things that can make the big difference, it becomes much more harder to get what's important to you over. It's called, I always say, it's called killing them with roses, as we would say. It's when you're a mensch, when you're good. I don't say kill. I mean to say it's called that the house automatically goes along with a lot of what's important to you, without a lot of effort, because there's a respect back. And that's one of the keys to be able to have an emissaire, Yiddish Chassidische Shtub. It's like I tell people in Chinuch also. You can give me a whole checklist of what you want from your children. The whole 9 yards. Checklist. The big question is, how do you get it? How do you make it that your children should go along with you? How are you successful by doing? How do you do that? What's the tools? And of course, one of the tools is this kind of connection that we're talking about. With a wife for sure, and with children also. Aber das ist eine besondere Sache. Hemshech Yove. Okay.